Good evening, and welcome to St. Bartholomew's Church in the city of New York. My name is the Reverend Zach Yane, and together with my clergy colleagues, Peter Thompson, Meredith Ward, and our whole team here at St. Bart's, a very warm welcome. Whether you're here in the room or joining us online, we are so glad that you are here. Whoever you are, wherever you are on your journey, we hope that you will feel at home in this place. Tonight we are ecstatic to be celebrating the release of the Reverend Canon Stephanie Spellers' latest book. Church Tomorrow, What the Nuns and Duns Teach Us About the Future of Faith. We're especially honored to be joined in conversation by Bishop Matt Heyd, the Reverend Ryan Karotko, and a host of non-religious young adults willing to spend their Thursday nights in church. So Jocelyn, Dylan, Coco, Dorian, Liam, welcome and thank you for being here. And thank you as well to members of the team at Church Publishing for their presence and support of this event. We'll begin with a conversation between Bishop Matt and Canon Stephanie before welcoming our other guests into the discussion, and we'll conclude with Q&A. You can write your question on a question card available from our Associate for Community Engagement, Curry Brinson. He'll be making rounds around the room. You can fill out a card and hand it back to him. Or if you're online, you can offer questions using the chat box on YouTube or Facebook, or by emailing the Reverend Peter Thompson at pthompson@stbarts.org. Following tonight's panel conversation, all are welcome to join us for worship in the chapel at 7 p.m., and following at 8 p.m., we'll return to the back of the church for our festive reception and book signing. Now, please join me once again in welcoming Bishop Matt and Canon Stephanie.
So, I'm introducing the person who literally needs no introduction. Canon Stephanie Spellers has changed our church and made it stronger. Her voice always helps us be bolder in the proclamation of the gospel, more forceful in our love of Jesus. How many folks have read Radical Welcome, or Church Cracked Open, or heard Canon Stephanie preach in such a way that you went home and thought, oh, my faith is bigger because of Stephanie Spellers? And now this book is a gift to us as a church that's changing, the church trying to understand where we are, and it's wonderful to be in conversation tonight. So I'm grateful for this book and the possibilities. So, Stephanie, you've probably been to more Episcopal churches than any of us combined. And preach more places than any other clergy ever will, except maybe...
It's the color of the hair.
Well, so you've written about nuns and duns. Why does this matter?
Oh, my goodness. So I got really curious about the question of what's happening out there in the world, especially with folks who are non-religious, about the time I was getting ready to step away from working so deep in the heart of the institution. I realized that working on this book was in some ways maybe even like an institution cleanser for me. That after 9 years working for the presiding bishop's office and being, again, kind of just at the heart of institution, to say, but there's actually more going on, isn't there? There's more going on. And inside the institution, we sit, and a lot of what we do, honestly, is we talk about, oh, we're in decline. Like the generations that are coming up have very little interest in church. And a lot of the people, honestly, who used to be a part of church, people who, for whom church was kind of like something they always did, they've been drifting away too. And so I just knew that we're all sitting with these hard questions. And that it's easy, honestly, to sink into shame. It's easy to sink into a place of, woe is me, woe is us, no one wants us. But instead, it's like, there's got to be more to this story. I know there's more to this story. And so I wanted to find out, first of all, why have so many Americans opted out of traditional religion? So that's kind of the first part of the book, to just look at the facts and to do it without feeling guilty, without feeling shame, feeling brave, but feeling curious, but also just kind of diving into those numbers. But again, not stopping with the numbers, instead moving to narrative and saying, again, what is happening out there? I was a journalist before I was a priest, so to me, I will always be wondering, I will always be ready to put that cap on, that reporter's cap, and to ask the questions I hear us asking as church, but to go out and maybe kind of be fearless and find the people, and thank goodness so many of them said yes, find the people who want to talk about their experiences of the sacred, their experiences of community, and just what's happening out there that the church doesn't know, because we're church. We can't know. So why don't we be quiet and listen?
Well, so the book gives a really important and bracing account of the trends and the numbers.
Yeah.
Give us a little background on what's been happening that maybe we haven't seen.
Yeah. So I think a lot of people know anecdotally. We know anecdotally that generationally, there's been drop-off in engagement with traditional religion. Generationally, there's been a drop in the percentage of Americans who say that they are Christian. So I wanted to actually do a real life dive and say, so what's going on with that? So early in the book, I'm citing the numbers, and some of them are scary. Some of the numbers, that when I was born in 1971, 90% of Americans said they were Christian. And the idea of nuns almost didn't exist, really, in 71. And then if you fast forward from that time to now, we're sitting with 28% of Americans saying that they are non-religious. And that's just really a lot of that increase has happened since 1998, basically since the 2000s. That some fundamental things in American life have shifted. We've become so much more privatized, so much more isolated. How many of you have a phone within reach right now? Yeah, exactly. So if you're looking for what happened to us, we got attached to phones, we got attached to technology, we got attached to all of these things that constrict our circle. Our worlds get so small, and interestingly, the phone makes you feel like your world is big, right? But in terms of relationship, that's not happening nearly as much. So I wanted to kind of look at what's that, not just trend, but that experience. What's happening to us? What's happening to us around secularization? Again, to look and say, wow, 20, 30, certainly 40 years ago, if you didn't want to be a part of a religious community, basically you didn't say so. You kept it to yourself. You continued to engage. You did what your parents had done and their parents had done. But about 40 years ago, any boomers in the house? This is you. This is you. That basically boomers were kind of the generation who said, we have the choice. We could opt out. We could ask bigger questions. They also engaged in pluralization. In other words, the boomers are the ones who were like, look at this spiritual marketplace. Let's go running through it and just grabbing stuff off the shelves. And so those boomers raised children, millennials, who are even more excited about building their own spiritual, what I call bento box, building your own spiritual life and saying, I like this, and it's the perfect experience for you. There just may not be anybody else who shares it with you. So that's a lot of what's going on with these numbers. That's the story behind the numbers for us.
Well, you talk a lot, and we're going to talk tonight about nuns and duns.
Yes.
And I learned something in the book I didn't know about you, which is nuns for a while, the first half of your life, included you.
Yes.
What is a nun and a dun And what's that mean for you?
How did I go from none or done to this?
Right. Exactly.
First of all, my family is very happy that it happened. I grew up in a small city town in Kentucky, surrounded by Christianity, but asking a lot of big questions. And honestly feeling just alienated from what I saw in Christian community, Christian life, Christian doctrine. I had spiritual experiences, and I think I even had a sense of who God might be. And I knew that what I was experiencing in the church of my youth was not that. And I was not baptized. So when I say the church of my youth, I mean the church I was surrounded by. But I wasn't baptized till I was 26 and a half. So I spent exactly half of my life, I'm 53 right now, I spent exactly half of my life a nun. I studied religion in grad school, went to Harvard Divinity School, got my master's in theological studies. I was a religion reporter for a newspaper in East Tennessee. I did lots of things adjacent to religion, majored in religion in college. But in terms of claiming it for myself, I just had a long list of reasons why I would never. And then I met Christians, I met people who were followers of Jesus. And it was the Jesus who's kind of radical, and the Jesus who loved everybody. And they were expansive, and they were welcoming mystery, and they were about bodies, and we were going clubbing, and that helped. I'm not gonna lie. And so they opened a way for me into a Christianity that I could not have imagined when I was younger. And I committed. Like when I got baptized, I think I was also just committing to coming all the way in and making a way for other folks who might have that long list like I had. Not that everybody has to. I do not believe you have to be in church or even declare that you're a Christian in order to have a relationship with God. Let that land. And I know because when I was a nun, I had one. So I would be invalidating what God was doing in my life before my own baptism if I lied and said that. So I can't. But I can say that being a part of Christian community, being in relationship with Jesus, the Jesus of the Gospels, changed my life and set me on a path to kind of participate in what it is that he was doing, the work of liberation, celebration, and transformation. So, and I just want to create as many pathways into that as there are people who want to taste him.
This book does what I've experienced throughout your ministry, which is you help us confront hard truths about who we are. You also help us to hope.
I hope so.
What do you hope as you share this? What do you hope?
I hope, first of all, there are 4 questions, and you're about to hear folk engaging them momentarily. There are 4 questions that I went out on the road with. And I hope that each of you here, I hope, please read the book. That would be fantastic. But more than that, I hope you go out curious and ask these questions of people you know. I was just so, and I love to be able to turn to y'all and say, I was so blessed by the conversations we had. I was on fire after every one of these conversations. And so I want to invite you to go out there and have them for yourself. Sure, read and think about and be in conversation with what I found and what I heard. But if it sounds interesting to you, it's going to be even better for you to go and have coffee with a nun or done in your life. I think there's just so much for us to learn from each other. And you don't have to be Christian to have wisdom that can help the church to be the church that we don't yet embody, but we could. So go out, have the conversations. Go out, be brave. Go out, be curious. Be humble. Be loving. And learn about loving and community and humility and all of that from the folk that you would least expect to teach you.
So we're going to have a version of that conversation right here.
Yeah.
And so the first of the 4 questions you asked was, talk about your spiritual journey. What's your spiritual journey been like?
Hey, so...
Tell us who you are, please.
Right, so my name is Liam. I actually grew up going to this church. I grew up an Episcopalian. When I became a teenager, I think like most teenagers, I started to inherently question the things that I believed up to that point. Religion was part of that. Found myself drifting away from believing in the concept of a God. Was in the sea for a bit looking for a spiritual path because I was still spiritual, I just didn't know how to really practice it. Discovered Buddhism via a professor at SUNY Albany that I liked, and from there it just sort of grew and grew until I am a regular practicer of Buddhism, specifically Shin Buddhism, up at a temple on the west side.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I wrote mine down because I wanted to stay on time. My name is Dylan Borgman. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm a director of engineering at a company called Personified. I grew up in Ohio in a spiritual but non-denominational household. My dad was raised Catholic. My mom was deeply spiritual but broadly open to many types of beliefs. She loved Whitley Strieber's books, Communion, acupuncture, Carlos Castaneda, and dabbled in metaphysical questions about the universe. Some of my earliest moral conversations came from watching Star Trek with her. And above all, my parents always encouraged me to find meaning on my own terms and seek out my own answers. She died when I was 16, and that loss sent me on a long period of searching. I explored Zen Buddhism for a time, and later I spent years attending a highly respected yoga studio. It was slightly cultish, but I appreciated its emphasis on the mind-body connection and on caring for yourself and as an act of worship. Excuse me. Art was always a big part of my spiritual life too. Photography, painting, sculpture have always been places in my life where I find a sense of purpose. It wasn't until about 6 years ago that I revisited organized religion. I met my wife, Shayna, who is an Episcopalian, and planned to raise her children in that tradition. I never thought that I would date, alone marry, someone who was embedded in organized religion, and I can speak to that more if we have time. But since then, I have practiced and attended some church with her as a form of support and love to her and my family, but my personal beliefs remain less codified.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I did not write mine down.
Go ahead, girl.
And when Stephanie said, keep it to a minute, I felt her looking directly at me. I'm Jocelyn. I am an engineering manager, so similar job. I grew up in what I like to call fundamentalist adjacent evangelical Christian household. So we weren't wearing like the long denim with the kids, but like we knew people that were. I was homeschooled for 1st through 8th grade. I went to a private Christian high school. I went to a private Christian college. And boy, did I get some trauma. I ended up very mentally unwell in college. And as I began to unravel why I was so unwell, a lot of it was wrapped up in what I'd been raised in. I'd been steeped in this patriarchal, fundamentalist view of the world, of myself, of everything. And it just did not jive with who I was, as a person and in my soul. And I think I always felt that. And it created this very difficult tension and anxiety, which manifested as a panic disorder. And so as I started getting treatment for that in college, I slowly kind of began my climb out of evangelical Christianity, because, and I only kind of see it this clearly in hindsight, but I sort of had two options. It was you can stick with everything you've been raised with and probably not survive it eventually, because it's you can't be that mentally unwell indefinitely. Or you get to flip your whole world upside down and build it up from the ground. And I didn't want to die, so I did the second thing. And again, like, it was not like I made that choice in the moment. It was like, in hindsight, I see that that's what I did. But like, it's just been since then a very slow evolution out of fundamentalism and evangelicalism, and part of my journey actually was Episcopalianism. I joined Stephanie's church in Boston. It was beautiful, it was wonderful, it was exactly what I needed at that time. I joined a really beautiful church when I moved to London that was very similar. But then when in case you couldn't tell, I've lived all over. So then when I moved back to the States, I was in San Diego, and I just couldn't find a place that felt like a spiritual home. And so I stopped going. And I discovered that I was really healthy when I wasn't going. And so even when I moved here and knew that I could probably find something similar to a crossing or what I had in London, I just didn't really feel the need. And my spiritual practice now is very personal. Like, it's very, like, the bento box. It's very woo-woo, like, especially when it comes to things like death and things like that. It's just like a lot of whatever feels right to me, and whatever practice, like, is meaningful to me. That was not a minute, but I'm done.
As well said, though. My name is Dorian. I live in Brooklyn. I'm from San Francisco, California. That's where I was born and raised. I resonate with a lot of what you said, and I'll say mine quite plainly just because I've worked with a lot of teenagers and young people, and I find a lot of similarities in my generation that I feel like are misunderstood. When I was in high school, a couple of things started happening to me kind of spontaneously. The first was I would get on the second bus, transfer on my way back home in the afternoon, and just feel like I've lived this day over and over and over again. It's like Groundhog Day. There's something very defeating about that. It was like, I don't want to do this forever. And then the other thing that was happening, and I say it because just like the mental health statistics in young people are a mess, honestly, was I was having suicidal ideation also just out of the blue, going to sleep at night. And the combination of numbness and then this like very big intensity was very confusing for me. And I grew up in a house where both my parents were traumatized by the word God and religion and spirituality in a way, so that was foreign. But I just got curious because I felt sort of like you said, like there's a numb path that doesn't work. There's a mental health struggle, addiction path probably that's no good for me. I didn't know what to do. And then I started having, after that reckoning, a bunch of very wild spiritual experiences that I also see a lot in young people of like driving to martial arts and being like, I'm on acid and I'm not. Like I'm in altered states that you hear people reporting about who are long-term spiritual practitioners with no drug or substance in my body, and what is happening to me. And no reference point for that because there was no religion or spirituality around me. So there was pain and also weird openings initially that I just sort of followed anywhere I could possibly find people to talk about it. Yeah.
Thank you. I want to bring Ryan Caraco into the conversation as we Ryan is the chaplain at Canterbury Uptown based at Columbia University. So Ryan and Stephanie, what do you hear in the journeys of the folks who have spoken so powerfully and movingly?
Trauma, marriage, not finding a place that works.
Yeah.
I mean, that would be the short answer. Yeah, which is, I mean, roughly my experience of working with people of all kinds of ages, actually. The way that I often think about it or conceptualize it myself is that, in a way, we as human beings have the same spiritual questions we've always had. I think the better question is, if you had those questions, why would you go to a church? And that's sort of where we've ended up. And so a part of the challenge that I hear is finding an answer to that question. There's a great Cynthia Bourgeault book, I think it's about centering prayer actually, but she talks about working as a parish priest for years before realizing that the church had been a host for all kinds of spiritual groups that met there, but hadn't actually done any spirituality. That there were all these sacramental acts that happened that could be very spiritual. There were all of these actions that happened together that could be spiritual, but that no one had ever made those connections. No one had ever sort of drawn that for a community. And some of that is what I hear, but also the other thing I would highlight that I hear is particularity. I mean, all of y'all are different. I mean, I know that sounds shocking, but one of the things that I think about a lot whenever we use words like nuns and duns, words that I struggle with actually, that is that it sounds like it's all the same, and I have the sneaking suspicion that is not true. that is slightly misleading, and it works really well if you're, I don't know, publishing a book, Stephanie. But I strongly suspect that part of what Stephanie is after is the way in which those are particular. That those are categories that need to be kind of questioned and broken apart a little and listened to and thought about in terms of particular human life. So that's what I was hearing.
Precisely.
How does this resonate with what you've heard all over? You wrote in the book that folks said and didn't say spiritual but not religious a lot. How do you hear this tonight?
I mean, what I hear from each of you and what I heard from a number of people I interviewed here in New York, there were probably about, I think, a total of 10, and so you're hearing from 4 people right now. And then multiply that out, there were a total of 45 people I interviewed across America. And so there are a lot of people who hit that point that Liam was describing where they're like, I just don't believe what I've been taught. Like, no harm, no foul, but this isn't something I feel like I have to buy in with anymore. And then there are folk who've been hurt by church, the way that Jocelyn was describing, churches that traumatize people almost as their modus operandi, like it's what they do, they hurt people. And then there are churches where, and I think this goes to some of what Ryan was saying, but I think maybe even Dorian as well, the idea that like, I'm wanting to have this intense experience, a spiritual experience, and I just don't know that I'm gonna have it in that room on a Sunday morning between the hours of, 11 and whatever. And there are, of course, folk who just didn't grow up with it, and so they've honestly just found other ways. And so yeah, many pathways, and I came to respect the diversity of ways that people express kind of what is shorthand, none and done, but there's so much that's percolating underneath those titles.
So the second question you asked was, what is sacred for you? So I'm interested to hear for each of you, what's sacred mean?
So I want to go first just to mix things up.
Yeah. Thank you.
You raised them.
You're it.
Congratulations.
What's the question again?
What does sacred mean to you? What is sacred for you?
No, I just immediately get still and don't want to use words, truth be told.
Yep.
That's my answer.
Thank you.
My answer's a lot longer. Sorry.
You can have my minute.
I'm taking yours. I find the sacred all over the place. And it I love that about not having a quote unquote religion is that it can just surprise you where you find it. I find it in my dog. I find it when I see someone do something really kind for someone else on the street. I see it, on the subway when someone gives up their seat for someone. And I see it in the personal practices that I've curated for myself. And again, sometimes what works for me surprises me. It's my dog passed away last year, and that was, I live alone. I don't have a partner. Me and my dog she's my soulmate, and it was horrible, and it was a horrible loss. And so finding in the wake of that, finding what worked for me to remember her and mourn her was surprising at times. I built have a little altar and kind of finding tangible ways to remember her and honor her and things like that. For me is what works and is really meaningful. And yeah, I like the freedom to be able to kind of discover that and not be hemmed in by a doctrine or a certain way of doing things.
I would say that some of the most powerful sacred experiences, if you want to call them, have been rooted in my own body. For example, after my mother died, I had the experience of doing energy healing as a ritual, and I watched my arm turn a bright shade of green during that. It was the first time that I had ever witnessed anything like that I couldn't explain. And to this day, it's still deeply meaningful to me. I remember it very clearly. I've also had echoes of that when I practice yoga over the years. But I would say that the most deeply sacred thing for me is making art and the community surrounding it. I often make art for others, and the act of making it allows me to meditate upon my relationship with the recipient of that art and feel connected with them, to reflect on my experiences with them, to think about my time with them. And I also feel connected with them when I know that it's in their possession.
A lot of where I experience the sacred or spiritual now comes directly from temple. And I think partly that's because, not just from it being Buddhist, but also because I think I really lucked out with that being the type of Buddhism that I found. Because one of the big things, especially when Buddhism it feels like a bad word, but sold to Americans in a way as a new thing, is that the main thing that gets dropped from it is the more communal aspect of it. Because if you were to go up to someone on the street and to ask them what Buddhism is all about, you hear meditation, like you hear like chanting, and like those are big parts of it, but also the Sangha is also deeply important, and the particular organization and temple that I went to really puts that forward. One of my favorite examples of that actually is in something called the Vandana and Tisarana. It's a sort of half hymn, half chant that's always done roughly in the middle of service. And you chant in exact order. I go to the Buddha for guidance. I go to the Dharma for guidance. I go to the Sangha for guidance. There's no separation between the three. Like they're all treated as co-equal branches.
Dharma is...
Oh, Dharma is the teachings and various written sutras that guide the spiritual journey forward in this case. But they're all equally emphasized. Like no part of that is really devalued. And I think compared to, especially with a lot of other types of Buddhisms, and this is not to put shade on any other types of Buddhism in the U.S., but I think that this form of Buddhism, and especially the way it's practiced at this particular temple, really does a good job there. It's a very long answer, but that's because the community at the temple is very strong. There is a lot of extra stuff that happens not outside a temple where you can both talk about stuff and also just do things, and I really value that.
This leads to the next question, which is, what is community for you? And you've described it well. Do you want to add to that at all?
I think, because community to me is that you're surrounded by people who not only like you, love you, respect you, like want to like genuinely be around you and vice versa, but also just that you're collectively going forward and are open to experiencing new things and experiencing new ways of potentially studying or looking at things. That's something that happens a lot. And also, like one of my favorite things actually that is in the temple community is a thing called Buddha Goes to the Movies. It is a group that is run by a very lovely man who is a decent friend of mine now at the temple. And the genesis of it is basically sort of akin actually to some of the other answers, that Buddhism is in many places. Sometimes you don't see it, and it can be in film. And if you find a way that Buddhism or a lesson from a sutra of Buddhism is in the film, we invite you to present it to the class. And it can be it's quite fun. Like one of my favorites that they did for that was that we did an entire Zoom discussion on the Buddhism in the SpongeBob movie from the early 2000s. And you know what? It was actually severely substantial. Like there are other examples of that, like other kind of thing too. But like there's a lot of that, and I really love the fact that I'm in a community there, like which honestly not too dissimilar from St. Bart's, because St. Bart's is also like this. But also like I appreciate just how much the community at that temple is one that's willing to do stuff like that, like both to do serious stuff about like studying the Dharma, like studying what this all means, but also like having fun with it.
Yeah. Awesome.
So I found community in many places throughout my life. I would immediately point to my family when I was a kid. I went to a Montessori school that was a wonderful community. But in recent years, it's been my new family and my job that have become my community and given me a sense of purpose. I never thought myself ready to have children of my own. And when I met my wife and her children, I saw that I could immediately help someone who was in need. And by supporting them, that made me feel purposeful and satisfied in a way I don't think I ever really expected to feel. Similarly, my job has also unexpectedly provided me with a lot of purpose. As someone in technology, it's very rare to find a job that makes you feel like you're making a moral difference in the world. But I joined about 2 years ago a company that is values-driven and supports progressive institutions. It's full of enthusiastic and dedicated people, and it's given me a sense of purpose that when I get up in the morning, I am helping those who are making the world a better place. And that's something I just never expected to have working in technology.
Tell me more about the place where you work. We'll talk later. This one is actually, this is hard for me. I don't think I have, I think I'm still looking. I think I'm still looking for community. Like I mentioned, I don't have I have a family. I have parents and a sister, but I don't have a partner. I don't have children. And like as a single person in their, barely in their 30s still, that's like, it's hard to find community. Like I have some friends who are in the same life situation as I am, but a lot of them are not. A lot of them have partners and they have kids, and so they do their own thing for the holidays, you know, stuff like that, where it's not just inherent anymore in like your friend group that you all do stuff together. And the other piece of it that's hard for me is that, as I mentioned, like I've lived all over the world. I grew up in a military family, so I grew up all over. And then as an adult, I've also lived all over. New York is my home now. I've lived here for 7 years. It's longer than I've lived anywhere else, and I intend to stay here. As I said when I bought my apartment, I was like, I will die in this apartment.
You're a New Yorker now.
Exactly. But I have people that I love all over the world, and most of the people that I love the most are not here. They're in London, they're in Oakland, my parents are in Sydney. So it is, I'm still trying to create what community means for me, given all of those factors.
These are such big questions for such short periods of time. I think we're doing great. Yeah, I don't know. Just one piece of it that I've been looking for lately, as I've been in New York 2 years now and knew basically no one when I moved here, is this piece of spaces where there's like, I like this word parallel play that comes out of children, where it's like you're just playing, but you're not really interacting, but you're in the same space, and there's just like a sweet energy to it. And places where there can kind of be the different layers where we can be silent together, someone can be really sad, or someone can be really happy or really excited or whatever, or we're just making art at the dinner table, or we're cooking, or we're counseling each other, and there's something about that I'm looking for and finding more and more, but also finding the need to build it and cultivate it and have dinner parties, and in a weird way, like set the cultural tone. Like, we're not gonna interrupt each other tonight. Like, shut up. I just wanted to say that in the church just for once. Score.
Dorian 1, church 0.
I'm done.
Well, so final question is, what do we say to the church if the church was going to listen?
I said, will they? Under my breath. It's guttural.
Well, what would you say if the church was listening?
I said to Stephanie when she was interviewing me, I was like, I don't care so much. I don't feel like the church has something that I need, you know what I mean? I'm not like, I need you to give me something. But if I were to say something, and I feel a lot of conviction around this in my life and in the people around me and even in my immediate family right now, it's like, and looking at the world as it is and just how much suffering there is in sometimes my space, but in the people that I love, like, I loved the introductions you guys said of, yeah, what does it mean to be a follower of Jesus? Or like a radical, like, what if this isn't just a little bit of more coping through a little bit of community and a little bit of faith? Like, what if we get to live the practice? What if everyone you meet is a child of God, or Buddha, or has brilliancy? Like, what if this isn't just Sunday? What if this is every moment of your day? I think that would actually inspire young people to pay attention and not write it off. Because I said that in my introduction, I don't think young people, given what we're holding right now, are okay with just a little bit better as an inspiring messaging. I'm like, okay, bet, I'm out of here. That is not gonna cut it. But if it's that glimmer in your eyes that's like, I got a secret to tell you, I'm gonna get some popcorn and pull up and hang out. But don't judge me, you know? Okay.
That was really good. That was good. Good job. I think it depends on which church I'm talking to. Because if I'm talking to the church I grew up in, boy, oh boy, do I have a lot to say. None of it is good.
Say it.
But if I'm talking to the Episcopalian church, if I'm talking to like the church that I found, you know, when I was like in my early 20s, like that was a really beautiful spiritual home for me. And I think I have a lot, what I would say to that church is a lot different. And like I have a lot of really positive things to say. And I think the biggest thing, and like I mentioned in question number 1, the reason that I initially moved away from the church was just kind of circumstance. It was like, well, firstly, I moved to France. Again, told you I lived all over. Moved to France, and I was like, I went to one service in like the local Episcopal church, and I was like, this isn't gonna cut it. And then when I was in San Diego, I went to one service in the Episcopal church, and it was like very high church and like very just not, it was not speaking to me. And versus what I found at the Crossing and what I found at the church that I had in London was like, it felt very personal, it felt very intimate, it felt very radical, where we were doing things like, you know, we had like unhoused people that came to our services at our church in Boston, and like, you know, just kind of dealing with like social issues very up close and personal. And I think that piece of it is really beautiful and can be built on.
To understand what I would say to the church, you first have to understand how I arrived here today. My relationship with the Episcopal Church is the result of my relationship with my wife. And my hesitance to date her, initially at least, speaks to my hesitance to explore organized religion. When I first met her, I was suspicious that she was going to try to impose her faith on me. But what I discovered was that many of her best qualities are inseparable from her faith. Moreover, she was confident enough in her beliefs that she didn't need to have me share them. Like so many I know, most of my life I found fulfillment throughout with the usual drugs, accumulation of wealth, the abundance of media to consume. But over the past few years, I've encouraged and supported her to take a journey becoming a pediatric chaplain. And I've witnessed the fulfillment that she gets supporting people experiencing what must be the worst moments in their lives. And seeing her on that journey was also revelatory for me. And it speaks to what the church offers that video games don't. I can tell you that inclusivity is also important. As an example, take my first visit to St. Mark's in the Bowery. When it was time to take communion, I decided I would not participate. I felt it was wrong to put something in my body that symbolized a belief I didn't share. And I was also afraid of being judged for abstaining. But my wife didn't pressure me, and the congregation didn't seem to judge me either. Eventually, I came to accept this rite as a symbol of community, which I do believe in. When I stopped focusing on the metaphors, I found that it did give me fulfillment. That happened because I was allowed to arrive to that meaning on my own. So if I could say one thing to the church, it would be this. It's not the Bible, and it's not the rituals that will attract someone like me. It's the people. It's about finding the right messengers, people who make space for all points of views, which is much the way that Reverend Spellers here has done with us tonight. So thank you.
Can I answer this one?
Yes, yes, you can.
Can I jump in?
Go for it.
No one asked me either what I want to say to the church, Dorian. And actually, what you said earlier, I said this to the students earlier. We were talking about this conversation tonight. Some students who are here, but who are part of our campus ministry up in Uptown. And I read the question, what would you say to the church? And the first thing I said was, shut up. That was literally the first thing I said. In part because it's, and in a way, I'm saying this much more as a campus chaplain who spent a long time watching young adults try and find community. And it is about building relationships. It is just about that and not about what new people bring to you. Yeah. Shut up and listen. And build a relationship and let all the rest of it go. I think that is so important and the heart of so much. And I have two minor points sort of along with that I would just mention. At church, please share your money and power. Young people constantly, in my experience, when they leave a campus ministry, if they've had a good experience, and I hope many have or some have, and they come out trained and excited about their faith and the important role it might play in whatever their career is, and they show up at churches who want them to sit in the back of the pew for 2 years and then maybe join a committee. Share your money and power. I think part of what it means to be part of a community is that there's mutual accountability. And young adults want that just like everybody else. Yeah. Literally just like everybody else. Oh God, I had a third thing, but see, I didn't write anything down either.
We'll hear from Liam.
I'm sure it will come to me, I'm sure. But yeah, it would be advice for all of us, which is, don't always vote with your feet. We live in a society that teaches us if we don't like what we bought, we should go buy it somewhere else. Church is not a service provider. It's a community. There are great reasons to leave, abuse and trauma being foremost among them. There are great reasons to get out, as the movie has it, get out. But all of us, we get a slight bit angry and we don't go for a while and we don't talk to people, or we're trying to, it's so hard to church shop, it's miserable. If you've never church shopped, don't, unless you have to, and then you should. But all of us vote with our feet in our relationships with each other and in our relationships with a wider community. And that is hurting us a lot. If you're mad, say so. Take a risk. Say, I liked it here, but what you're doing to me is not working. Take a risk. That is part of what we are missing, I think, in our communities. It has become so easy just to step out. This was more than my time, but I decided I should say something.
Yeah,
So Liam, wrap, and then I'm turning back to Stephanie to wrap this up. Wrap this part up.
I think, my point, the thing that would raise to any church or Christian group that's trying to reach young people, it's not honestly too dissimilar from what's already been said of we are a generation that has multiple forms of existential anxiety we have to deal with every single day. This was true before Trump got reelected, especially with climate change and affordability issues, and now many of those, as well as many new ones, for a lot of groups have been turbocharged. So I think just that's a basis of understanding that needs to be met immediately for any conversation to really happen. There are some churches that are trying to have that. I'd argue also that there are some groups that say they're trying to do that, but are also doing so in a way that for malicious intent. Obviously, St. Bart's and churches like St. Bart's are not in that group, but that is nonetheless a risk because we are also a generation that's very, very vulnerable in many, many ways, and that can be very easy to be taken advantage of if the circumstances are right. We're seeing that in far too many instances right now. So that would be the main thing. Everything can branch out from there, but the main thing is just to recognize from the off that we will be coming to you from a very vulnerable place. And from a very vulnerable place that we're constantly being reminded of in one way or another. And from that basis of understanding, you can potentially do something, but you can't start it without that.
So we're going to turn to questions from the audience and from online, and Peter's going to help lead us through that. But Stephanie, wrap up this really rich. First of all, help me thank the folks who shared tonight. So, gosh, you've done this all around the country.
Yeah.
Help us hear what you heard tonight. What a wonderful thing.
Yeah. I came close to tears so many times listening with you all, and I think I'm grateful. I'm grateful to my husband, who's actually back there right now, for encouraging me to take the time to go and do the listening. Like, not everybody gets to do what I've just done. And then to go and write it up as well. Like, what a gift. What a sheer gift. And I hope that somehow I'm modeling to other folks, and especially to church leaders, that I think we've heard it here enough times, that like, our greatest gift may not be all the things that we present to folks as, ooh, look at how fantastic our church is, all the work we put in. Our greatest gift may be creating space to listen and to love, and to be real and vulnerable as a lot of the folk that we're encountering out there. So much of church life is kind of putting on the face, putting something on, and then going and presenting that best face. Ain't nobody looking for that, including God. God's not looking for our best face. So be real, please, and it will be a blessing. You will be a blessing.
So we have time for a couple questions. Peter Thompson.
Yeah, we have a few minutes left. If you're in the room and you have a question card that's already filled out, raise it high. Curry Brinson will come around and collect them. If you're joining us online, you can type your questions into the comments on Facebook or the live chat on YouTube. One question for the young folks that were talked to by Stephanie. What was it like having this conversation with Stephanie to be asked about these topics?
It's a great question.
Honestly, therapeutic. Because Stephanie, just with my case, Stephanie is someone who I've known for a bit, so I've automatically felt very comfortable being able to talk and give statements I give in the book, but also it feels really good, just as someone who is constantly worried about what the future will look like for me and for other people my age and younger. It's great to be able to have a space to air that out, and I think that a lot of the time that's tolerated to an extent, but we're sort of asked to shut that down after a bit. And I don't think any of us, and none of us really felt not speak for everyone, but I think none of us really felt shut down afterward, because we were allowed to sort of fully air out what we're all feeling on this.
I have a mic, so I'll speak. First of all, I really enjoyed my conversation with Stephanie. I came to it very tabula rasa. My wife said she's asking for people. It's this person I know. Do you mind talking to her? So I invited her over, and we had a wonderful, maybe hour-long chat. It was only afterwards that I started to understand who I was talking to and the implications that might have. I'm glad that I did the way I did, though, because I, especially just having seen little bits of the book and things, I feel like you really treated our words with respect and are being very insightful about what we had to say. So, yeah, it was wonderful.
Peter?
Right. We have a question about kind of conservative and liberal forms of religion. We've talked a little bit about that, but why is it that it seems that conservative forms of religion are more vibrant than liberal ones, and how does that fit into this conversation?
To go to you, and then I want to hear from Stephanie, because she writes about it.
Sorry, I missed part of it. What was the second?
It seems, at least to the person who asked the question, that conservative forms of religion are more vibrant, they're stronger than liberal forms of religion. And how does that play into this dynamic?
I don't know if that's true. I think they're just louder. They're louder about it. Oh my God, they're so loud. There was this rally. It's one of the things that I've gotten very involved in the last, since the inauguration, has been I'm an artist. I do protest art. I show up at protests with my art. And so there was this some event in, I think, Times Square earlier this year that was put on by some bigoted conservative evangelical organization, and there was like a small group of folks that were going to protest it, and I was like, I will be there. Like, this is important for me to be there, and so I was, and I did, and it was like we didn't outnumber, like the protesters didn't outnumber the event, but like there were not that many people at this event. It was maybe like a few dozen. 100 at most. And then I saw the social media posts afterwards by this organization, and they were billing it as like thousands gathered in Times Square to blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, they're just straight up lying. So like, I genuinely don't think that it's like they're more vibrant or they're more, people are more drawn to them. I just think they're really loud about it, and they lie a lot, like genuinely. That's my 2 cents.
If I can actually add to that too, because I think part of that too is that right-wing religious groups are very, very good at playing media, especially in the U.S., because we are automatically a media that tends to be very right-wing in terms of framing by default. And they're in a natural position to be able to capitalize on that, especially like as the media environment turns more and more right. I think that's also part of it too, that they're better at being able to generate reactionary headlines because that's the way that the American news media operates. Like they like those headlines more than more nuanced headlines that non-reactionary groups could offer instead, I think.
What'd you find?
2 things that I'll mention here. First of all, if you look at the numbers, not just anecdote, but the numbers are that the more conservative traditions, including, for instance, Assemblies of God, that they are some of the only churches growing. So we can, they're loud and they're growing. And there are a lot of reasons why, and some of it is community, some of it is what we were describing, some of it is, and I tried to describe this in the book too, but that honestly, a lot of the traditions, the more conservative traditions, and certainly the Pentecostal traditions, they're able to say why God matters in a way that liberal folk just don't. We're kind of ambivalent about God, we're kind of ambivalent about Jesus, and people can sniff that out. It's like, guess what? I got a lot going on in my life, so if God doesn't really make a difference, why would I spend time in your church? Why would I do that? And so at least like those churches make a case. You can disagree with their case, but they're making a case. And it is a compelling case for a lot of people, especially lonely people looking for a sense of purpose. So that's one thing, is actually that many of them are growing, and there's a reason why. They're also often more open to the movement of the Spirit. And I'm convinced that unless kind of churches like, whether it's St. Bart's or a small, Methodist church around the corner or whatever, that until we open, unless we are really opening to the Spirit who controls more than we control. And when you've got privilege and power and money and education, it's hard to let somebody else be in control, especially the Holy Spirit. It just is. And haven't needed her in the same ways. And so I think a lot of those churches are actually open to and defined by a relationship with the Spirit. And the Spirit is the one who will grow a movement. The Spirit is the one who heals souls. The Spirit is the one who wants her church back, if she ever even had it in the first place. So I think that kind of relevance, and I know we're hesitant around the word relevant, but I'm talking about being relevant as in to the soul work that a lot of people actually want to do. We will be relevant to that when we open to the power of the Spirit.
I see Zach's about to call us to worship.
So we're over time, but we're going to fit one more question really quickly.
Great.
This is to you, Stephanie. If
dear.
you had to write an epilogue, now that you've done all this work, who would you interview for the epilogue, and what questions would you ask?
Oh boy. Hey, publisher, how you doing? I honestly was super torn when I was working on the book, and even more so like having written it. I feel like the epilogue is, I would really have fun interviewing nuns and duns who have said yes to Christianity, to find out what was happening, what What made you open the door when so many traumas made you say no? Like, what were churches doing, learning? Basically, are there churches that are operationalizing some of the response to the prophecy of nuns and duns? Because I'm convinced that, honestly, a lot of our churches are congratulating ourselves for having already figured it out, and that there's something else going on that even we don't know, and we're congratulating ourselves before we need to. So I would love to do the research to find out what's happening that people are willing to re-engage an institution that in many ways is dwelling in the valley of the dry bones. Mm-hmm. Where are they finding life? Mm-hmm. So maybe that's part 2. Who knows? Publisher's like, okay, we'll see. I had to ask the husband. I'm not asking the publisher, I'm asking the husband. He was like, girl, you better go get a job.
Well, so everybody's invited to Imagine Worship at 7 o'clock.
Yes.
Everyone's invited to a book signing and further conversation. But we have our assignment, right? Buy the book, read the book, but also to listen.
Yes.
And help our communities listen. Help me thank Canon Spellers for her prophetic leadership. Zach, do you want to introduce Imagine Worship?
Well, we're all done with the conversation, but the night isn't over. So anyone who would like to is invited to join us in the chapel, which is just through the back doors of the church to your left. And then we'll gather in the chapel in the next 10 minutes or so for Imagine Worship. Maybe it's your first time at church or your first time in a long time. Please know that all are warmly welcome. And no one is pressured to take part, but we would love to have you join us. And then following Imagine Worship, we'll gather back in the back of the church for some pizza and festive beverages. And if you're just really allergic to church, you're welcome to hang out in the back, and we'll see you at the end. So thank you all.
Thank you.